Breaking news in the NBA. The Toronto Raptors have fired their head coach, Nick Nurse. It closes the book on 10 years in Toronto for Nurse, including the past 5 as head coach. His biggest achievement there was winning it all back in that 2018-2019 season. But since then, they've only won one playoff series. ESPN reporting that former Boston Celtics head coach Ime Udoka is expected to be a candidate to replace Nurse out in Toronto. As for Nurse, he might not be unemployed for too long. He's reportedly expected to be a candidate for the opening with the Houston Rockets. The tale of the tape on those times spent out in Toronto for Nick Nurse, a record of above 500. 582 win percentage in his 5 seasons as head coach. Went 41-41 this year, lost in the play-in. Of course, won that championship in 2019 when Kawhi Leonard was there and was named Coach of the Year in 2020. We now bring in our coach, Avery Johnson. And Coach, you hear about Nick Nurse being fired. What was your first reaction to that news? Is this a shock?
It's not a shock. I'm a little surprised. You heard there were some rumblings in the air up in Toronto. Obviously, after they won the championship, it really shows what Kawhi Leonard can do to a franchise. The San Antonio Spurs hasn't been the same since he left. And now the Toronto Raptors, after he won that championship, now their coach subsequently, a few years later, have gotten fired. So I'm a little bit surprised. Sometimes, that coach of the year, man, that could be the kiss of death sometimes. I've been through it, and I've seen other coaches who've been named coach of the year, and a couple of years later, they've been fired. But you got Siakam, who's up for a max extension, Fred VanVleet, free agent this summer, Gary Trent. Those guys potentially be free agents. So a lot of question marks about this franchise. But Nick Nurse, he's in a situation, as you alluded to, he'll be in the running for that Houston Rockets job. So hopefully he'll be able to land on his feet.
Where do the Raptors go from here as they try to maybe, change the tide? It doesn't seem like they really get too many free agents to want to come and play out there in Toronto. So if you're that franchise, what are they trying to do now?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with all of these guys that could potentially be free agents. You got to have players. So are you going to continue to be the middle of the road team, maybe a team that's playing in the play-in? Do you want to allow a lot of those guys to walk as free agents and just go totally young and go through what the Philadelphia 76ers called years ago the process? Do you want to go through that and be in the lottery for several years and try to reboot? Do you want to potentially, sign and trade and try to get some other star power players on your rosters? I think there's a lot of question marks about this franchise. And I think at this point, you maybe have to go for it where you could become maybe a consistent playoff team, or you have to totally rebuild this situation. So we'll see what happens with the Toronto Raptors. There's a lot of question marks, especially now after firing Nick Nurse about this franchise.
With so many question marks and pieces to fill out with that roster, why do you think they made this decision to get rid of Nurse, especially if he brought them to the pinnacle and it brought them back to the playoffs a few times since?
Well, when he brought them to the pinnacle, that was with Kawhi Leonard. This is post Kawhi Leonard. And decisions like this, they weren't just made yesterday. This was a comprehensive decision on how the coach matriculated with the roster, what type of chemistry he had with his coaching staff, with the front office. So I'm sure this was a decision that was probably made sometime back in February or March. It wasn't. This decision didn't occur today on April 21st.
In coaching circles, how is Nick Nurse viewed as a coach out there? Is he a top tier? Where does he really fit in?
I think overall he's a well-respected coach. When you lead a team to the NBA Finals, independent of who's on your roster, that's a phenomenal feat. I had a chance to coach in the NBA Finals in 2006, and man, we were up 2-0, and then we lost 4 straight, and they're just all turned around on us in a negative way. It's hard to win a championship. Players have to stay healthy, play at a high level. They can't tune your voice out. So overall, I think he's a respected coach. But there are a lot of coaches that have had to change teams. Even some of the legends, very few have had to run like a Jerry Sloan or a Greg Popovich, where you can, coach one team. A lot of coaches have had to bounce around and coach different teams. But I think overall, he's a respected coach, and he's a coach that potentially is going to get another coaching job.
Yeah, so Nick Nurse looking for a new job. We'll have to see what the Raptors decide to do as they look for a new person, maybe target Ime Udoka. But we have our coach here, always tapped in with us here on HQ. Thank you very much, Avery Johnson, breaking down that breaking news coming out of the NBA. You look at the offense for the Raptors this past season, the last season under Nick Nurse, and it was not good. The efficiency certainly not there from Trey Land and from the field. Averaged just 112.9 points per game, which ranked 24th in the NBA, a team that lost in the play-in to the Bulls after going 41-41 during the regular season. So Nick Nurse is out. More HQ up later.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.